All right, hey everybody, coming at you today with a little bit of a rant and a rave about something I talked about earlier. I want to get into on a deeper level, and it's this comment from people, I wish I could eat carbs. Let's stop the effing nonsense, but let's start this video with great big headline, we eat carbs. So one of the frustrating things we always encounter in the Able camp when people take notice of our physiques or our leanness, or my clients who have lost over 100 pounds and kept it off, people will genuinely inquire, how did you lose the weight? Or how do you stay lean? Or how do you look that way? And when myself or my clients or Andy respond, we eat a high carb diet, somehow instead of taking that answer and learning from it, people with the North American diet mentality twist this in their head and come out with what we call a confirmation bias, where they end up saying something as ridiculous as, I wish I could eat carbs. Somehow they translate the answer that they're looking for weight loss and sustainable weight control and leanness and physique transformation, the answer, we eat a high carb diet, somehow isn't good enough as an answer, and because of the North American diet mentality and misinformation and outright low-carb lies out there, they twist the information in their mind, I wish I could eat carbs. So we're going to look at some research here, specifically 3 elements of research that tell a story of how people actually gain weight and gain fat and get fatter, and what kind of diet strategy human beings had to eat in order to evolve and survive and to become the reigning species on the planet. And we're going to use this in the context of, I wish I could eat carbs. So we're going to look at 3 studies. We're going to look at a clinical study of overfeeding, so we can look at just what kind of food leads to people storing more fat. We're going to look at cultural study that shows when people change their diet, what kind of food leads to people storing more fat. And then, as I said, we're going to look at human evolution itself to see what kind of diet it was likely we engaged with to survive and grow our brains as a human species. So I'm going to start with this study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2001. The study is de novo lipogenesis during controlled overfeeding with sucrose or glucose in lean and obese women. So people who are more prone to putting on weight to begin with, females, and de novo lipogenesis just means newly formed fat. That's all you need to know about that. So in this study, what they did is they overfed women, both obese and lean women, with sugar, simple sugars, sugar and glucose, and yet the fat that the women stored was from the fat that they ate and not from these carbs. And that was with overfeeding, with simple sugars, sugar and glucose in the overfed state. So their conclusion was that sugar doesn't contribute a whole lot to fat storage. And in fact, I'm going to read you this conclusion here. And I quote, de novo lipogenesis increases after overfeeding with glucose and sucrose to the same extent in lean and obese women, but does not contribute greatly to total fat balance. So here we have overfeeding, which leads to weight gain in and of itself. If you take in more calories than you need, then you're going to gain weight. But the level and percentage of weight gain that people hold on to was actually from the fat that they eat. So the fat that you eat becomes the fat that you wear. So imagine if overfeeding with simple sugars was instead substituted with eating healthy, whole food, high carb diets with starches, grains, legumes, beans, etc. So there's one conclusion right there that sort of cancels the I wish I could eat carbs conclusion, because here we overfed women with simple carbs, and the result was the weight that was gained in an overfeeding metabolic state was actually from the fat that they ate. So similarly, now we'll switch gears, and I've talked about this before, but the traditional Okinawan diet was famous for high carbs. 85% of the traditional Okinawan diet was from carbs, very high carb, very low fat, very low protein, and the people were the leanest, and they lived the longest, and they lived the healthiest as the longest as well. And now what we see is the country of Okinawa has now sadly westernized their diet to the point where they eat a lot more fat than the rest of Japan, and now Okinawa is the most obese area of Japan. And the lesson here is, as they ate less and less carbs and healthy whole foods and more fat and protein and meat and fast food, they became obese. So big surprise there. Less carbs, they gain more fat, and just like in the women's study above, the fat that they eat becomes the fat that they wear. So we see cross-cultural, we see clinical trial, and then from this article in the Telegraph in 2006 discussing the obesity epidemic in Okinawa, the Okinawan Islands, I'm just going to quote from this study, we'll put it up there on the screen for you to see. The Okinawan Islands in Japan's extreme southwest have more than 2.5 times the national average of people who live to be over 100 years old, and an extraordinary number of people who enjoy excellent health well into their 80s. But, however, the next generation of Okinawans is the fattest in Japan and prone to a range of obesity-related illnesses that could kill them by middle age. Experts blame the gusto with which Okinawa took to fast food when the island was administered by the U.S. Continue reading from this article in the Telegraph. Experts say that the generation that grew up eating American food is now reaching middle age overweight and at risk of diabetes. Listen to this. Almost 30% of Okinawan men die before reaching age 65, and nearly half of the men, 50% of the men in their 40s, are obese. And yet, in the census in 1995, Okinawa had the highest longevity of all 47 prefectures of Japan. By 2000, it was down to 26th place out of 47. As the oldest generation that lived the longest and healthiest dies, that generation from eating a high-carb, plant-based diet, unprocessed food diet, as they die off, longevity rates are going to fall. Dr. Tanaka, one of the researchers, said, and I quote, "When people reach age 99 in Okinawa, we have celebrations and take commemorative photographs. Often we can see the 99-year-old next to his grandchildren, and the grandchildren are overweight. The great-grandchildren will be healthy, but the son isn't there because he's already dead." So very, very important. Again, the lesson in Okinawa, who was celebrated, we studied their diets and looked at the healthiest diets that led to a better quality of life and longer life with less disease and illness, etc. As the westernized diet infiltrated Okinawa and they ate less and less carbs and more fat and protein and meat instead of soy, they became obese. So big surprise, less carbs, gain more fat, and again, it's worth repeating, the fat that they eat, like the woman's study above, becomes the fat that they wear. So this comment, "I wish I could eat carbs," really should be about, geez, I better not eat fat. And yet people are being inundated with the misinformation of low-carb lies. So again, read that article from the Telegraph and see what you come up with yourself. But that's two ways in which this notion that you can't eat carbs or that carbs become fat on your body is actually is a misnomer and pretty much an outright lie. So now let's look at human evolutionary studies, things that are often used to argue for paleo or keto or all this kind of thing. Now this one from the University of Chicago Press in 2015 is, and the title of this article, we'll throw this up for you, "Importance of Dietary Carbohydrate in Human Evolution. Our evolving human brain had such huge glucose demands that were," quote, and I quote here the study, "unlikely to be met on a low carbohydrate diet." So this is counter to paleo arguments, low carb lies, and keto and the rest of the non-scientific nonsense that exists out there, but puts imprints in your brains that somehow it's a special category of people that can eat carbs and you're the exception, whereas the research shows clinically, culturally, and historically in terms of human evolution, that high carb, low fat diet is actually the preferred human state in terms of weight control, not gaining weight, being disease free, being healthy, etc. So a statement as ridiculous as "I wish I could eat carbs" should be met with greater emphasis from people like myself. That should go along when people say, "I wish I could eat carbs." Well, you should be eating carbs for your health, for your life, for your quantity of years and quality of years depend on it. So we eat carbs. Boom, shakalaka laka, boom, boom. There's 3 studies. I could go on and on, but we want to keep these short to try to get people to understand the fat that you eat is the fat that you wear, and carbohydrates isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. And you're going to see more and more of this as the research keeps coming out and showing us what the reality of human diet strategy was composed of and should be composed of moving forward. So again, it's about a high carb, low fat diet being the healthiest and contributing to easy weight control and losing weight and keeping it off and being lean and physique transformation and the rest. So hopefully you understand that. Again, the take home message here is a confirmation bias that you can't eat carbs. I wish I could eat carbs. When you ask someone how they stay lean, how they look so good at a certain age, and they answer they eat carbs, don't dismiss that. That's the answer. So ask instead, well, can you show me how I can eat carbs and look that way or be that way, rather than dismissing it as something to be afraid of. And the other take-home message from this, of course, is from these studies that I showed in Okinawa, when they went from a high-carb, low-fat, unprocessed food, plant-based diet to a westernized fast food, high fat, more protein diet, they became the most obese area in all of Japan. So what we see and what we saw in the woman's study as well there is the fat that you eat is the fat that you wear. Boom, put that on the screen, and I'll leave you with that, and I will see you in the next video.